The unsolved mystery over 100 years old. 3 lighthouse keepers are stationed on a lonely rock in the middle of the Atlantic. Their only job? Keep the light burning through the wildest storms to guide ships to safety. It's a tough gig, but these guys are pros. Then one stormy night, the light goes out, and the men? They're gone. No trace, no explanation, just nada. This is the mystery of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse, one of history's creepiest unsolved cases. Welcome to History Unfolded. Let's get started. It's December 1900 and the Flannan Isles, a bunch of jagged rocks off Scotland's Outer Hebrides, are about as remote as it gets. No towns, no neighbors, just squawking seabirds, thundering waves, and a wind that screeches like a banshee. The Northern Lighthouse Board had just built a brand new lighthouse on Eilean Moor, the biggest island in the group, to save ships navigating one of the deadliest parts of the Atlantic. Storms out here could churn up 100-foot waves, swallowing ships whole in minutes. That lighthouse was a lifeline, its beams slicing through fog and night to guide sailors home. Lighthouse keeping in 1900 was no picnic. You're stuck on a rock for weeks, sometimes months, with nothing but the sea and your own head to keep you company. The Flannan Isles were especially brutal. Cut off from civilization, no telegraph, no quick rescue if things went bad. Keepers lived off bread, tea, and tinned meat, working 24-hour shifts to keep the lamp burning. They'd have to climb narrow spiral stairs to cut wicks, clean lenses, and check oil levels, all while storms rattled the stone walls. The job demanded grit, discipline, and maybe a touch of madness to handle the loneliness. The men on Eilean Moor weren't just average Joes either. They were built for this life. Or so everyone thought. The Flannan Isles carried a creepy reputation long before the lighthouse went up. Named after Saint Flannan, a 7th century Irish bishop who built a chapel on Eilean Moor, the islands carried many a myth. Shepherds brought sheep to graze but refused to stay overnight, saying spirits haunted the cliffs. Old Celtic tales told of selkies, shape-shifting sea creatures who could drag men to the deep. Others spoke of cursed grounds where humans weren't welcome. Building the lighthouse in 1899 was no small feat either. Workers hauled materials up 150-foot cliffs for years, battling storms and isolation. Locals called Eilean Moor the other country, a place where the veil between worlds felt thin. For the keepers, it was just another post, but for them, clearly it wasn't. The 3 men whose job it was to keep that light burning were no rookies. James Ducat, a 43-year-old, was the head keeper, a hardened veteran with a wife and 4 kids back on the mainland Scotland. He'd tamed lighthouses in storms that would break most people, writing letters home about the eerie calm between the gales. Thomas Marshall, 40 years old, was his deputy, a steady hand who filled logbooks with precise notes on every gust and wave just about. Donald MacArthur, the 3rd keeper, 38 years old, was the occasional keeper, a tough Highlander filling in for a guy on sick leave. He'd worked remote posts before, so no stranger to the sea's wrath or the long, quiet nights. These guys knew isolation, knew storms, and knew the drill. Oil the lamp, check the wicks, log the weather, and never, ever let the light go out. They arrived on Eilean Moor in early December, settling into their routine. Days were spent polishing the lighthouse's state-of-the-art Fresnel lens, a 1900s engineering marvel that threw light 20 miles out to sea. They hauled heavy oil cans, battled wind to raise the flagpole, and checked the cliffs for storm damage. The island was tiny, barely a mile long, half a mile wide, with rocky paths winding past ancient stone walls left by monks who'd prayed there centuries ago. Nights were long. The 3 men holed up in a 60-foot stone tower, maybe swapping stories of past postings, playing cards by lamplight, or joking about the weather. Ducat could have shared tales of his kids. Marshall griped about the damp. MacArthur reminiscing about his days as a tailor in Lewis. Everything seemed fine, or so it seemed. But on December 26, 1900, something went wrong. A supply ship called the Hesperus sailed towards Eilean Moor to drop off supplies and swap out the crew. Captain Jim Harvey, a weathered sailor, expected the usual: a flag waving, keepers at the eastern landing, maybe a shout. But as the ship got close, something was off. The lighthouse was dark. No beam lit the horizon, no flag flew, and no one stood at the landing. In the middle of the Atlantic, a dark lighthouse isn't just weird, it's a death sentence for ships counting on that light to dodge the rocks. Joseph Moore, the relief keeper, was sent ashore to check things out. He climbed the 160 steep stone steps carved into the cliff, calling out for Ducat, Marshall, MacArthur. All that screamed back was the wind, but the island was silent. No footsteps, no voices, just the crash of the waves pounding below. His gut clenched as he reached the lighthouse door, which was open. He stepped inside and found a scene that made his blood run cold. Inside, the lighthouse was frozen in time. The clock on the wall had stopped, its hands stuck at midnight. Beds were unmade, blankets tossed like men had just jumped up in a panic. A half-eaten meal, bread, mutton, a pot of tea, sat cold on the kitchen table. The oil lamp was in perfect condition, filled, ready to light, but unlit. 2 oilskin coats hung by the door, but MacArthur's was gone. The logbook lay open, its last entry dated December 15th, describing heavy storms, but nothing out of the ordinary. It was like the men had stepped outside for a second and never came back. The Hesperus crew searched the island, going over every inch of its rocky cliffs and sheep paths. No footprints, no bodies, no boat, nada. The only clue was at the western landing, where the sea hit hardest. Iron railings were bent like twigs. A lifebuoy was missing, and a storage box had been ripped from its foundation, 100 feet above the waterline. It looked like a monster wave had slammed through. But the logbook didn't mention a storm bad enough to cause that after December 15th. So, what happened? Why did 3 experienced keepers abandon their post? Let us know your theories in the comments, and while you're there, like and subscribe to keep these mysteries coming. The Northern Lighthouse Board launched an investigation, sending Superintendent Robert Muirhead to Eilean Moor in January 1901. Muirhead knew the keepers personally. He'd hired them, and his arrival was heavy with grief. He questioned the Hesperus crew, who swore the island felt wrong, like something was watching from the cliffs. They pored over the logbook written by Thomas Marshall and found entries that didn't add up. December 12th, gale north by northwest, sea lashed to fury. December 13th, storm continued, never seen such waves. December 14th, storm still raging. Ducat quiet, MacArthur crying. Crying? A tough-as-nails keeper like MacArthur crying at his post. And then the final entry on December 15th. Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all. What would make a man like MacArthur cry? Why did the log describe storms that nearby ships like the steamer Archer didn't report? And that cryptic God is over all, what's that about? Muirhead's team walked across Eilean Moor with lanterns, shouting into the fog, but found no new clues. They talked to fishermen on Lewis, 20 miles away, who whispered about strange lights in the sky that December, glowing orbs hanging over the sea. One old sailor swore he saw a ghost ship near the Isles that night, but no one took him seriously. The board's report was irritatingly vague. The men were likely swept away by a freak wave while working at the western landing. But that doesn't make sense. Lighthouse protocol was strict. 2 men always stayed inside during storms to keep the light burning. Yet all 3 seemed to have left together, with only MacArthur's coat missing. Why would keepers who knew the cliffs were 100 feet above the sea risk the western landing in a storm? And why was the lamp unlit when it was in perfect condition? A rogue wave could have caused the landing's damage, but the island's height made it unlikely to sweep 3 men away without leaving a trace. No boots, no hats, no bodies. Let's dig deeper. Lighthouse keeping wasn't just a physical grind, it was a mental marathon. Weeks of isolation in a 60-foot tower with 2 other guys could fray even the toughest nerves. The Flannan Isles had an eerie edge, with those ancient Celtic ruins from monks who'd prayed against the sea's wrath centuries ago. Locals on Lewis called Eilean more cursed, telling stories of spirits and omens that made your skin crawl. Could the keepers have been spooked by something? Those lights in the sky, maybe, or strange sounds in the night, enough to break protocol? Or was it just the endless storms, the tower's walls closing in, that pushed them to the edge? Muirhead's investigation noted the western landing's damage, bent railings, missing lifebuoy, but the eastern landing was untouched, ropes neatly coiled. If a wave hit, why only one side? He speculated the men went to secure equipment during a storm, maybe the crane at the western landing. Marshall had been fined 5 shillings, a hefty sum at the time, years earlier for losing gear in a gale, so maybe he was desperate to save it. But Ducat, the rule follower, would have kept someone inside. And MacArthur's tears, that's not the behavior of a seasoned mariner. Something was seriously off, and Muirhead couldn't shake the feeling the logbook held secrets he couldn't crack. Theories started swirling, and they're as crazy as the Atlantic is frightening. The official freak wave theory seemed tidy, but it ignored the logbook's oddities and the missing coat. Some thought the men snapped under isolation strain. 3 guys trapped in a stone tower for weeks, storms battering the walls, no escape. The psychological toll could have been brutal. Cabin fever turning to paranoia or rage. Maybe Ducat and Marshall argued over duties, or MacArthur's tears signaled a breakdown. Could one have turned violent, leading to a fight? The unmade beds and half-eaten meal point to a sudden exit, but no blood or struggle was found. Then there's the local folklore. Eilean Moor was deeply covered in myth, tied to ancient Celtic tales of Selkies, those shape-shifting sea creatures who lured men to their doom. Fishermen swore the island was cursed, that building a lighthouse there angered the spirits. Some said the keepers trespassed on sacred ground near the old chapel ruins, stirring up something dark. Others point to those strange lights locals saw in December 1900. Could they have been early UFOs? Secret military tests? Okay, it's a stretch for 1900, but the log's goddess overall fueled wild ideas. Maybe the keepers saw something they couldn't explain, something that drove them out into the night. Foul play was another angle. Could a rogue ship, like pirates, smugglers, or a foreign vessel, have docked at Eilean Moor? The keepers might have been kidnapped or killed, their boat taken to cover tracks, but the island's isolation made this unlikely. No distress signals were logged, and why leave the lighthouse untouched with food and oil intact? A more grounded theory was mutiny. MacArthur had a reputation for brawling back in Lewis, nothing serious, but he wasn't a pushover. Maybe he lost it, turning on Ducat and Marshall before jumping off a cliff in remorse. His missing coat and crying could point to him being the odd man out, but there's no proof, just theories. Another theory floated later was a desperate rescue attempt. What if a shipwrecked sailor washed up on Eilean Moor clinging to the cliffs? The keepers, bound by duty to save lives, might have rushed out to help, only to be swept away by a wave themselves. But no ship reported a wreck nearby, and the log didn't mention a distress call. Still, the idea of the men risking it all for a stranger fits their character. Ducat especially known for his sense of duty. But why leave the lamp unlit? Why no trace of a boat or body? The investigation didn't stop in 1901. The Northern Lighthouse Board tried to move on, but the mystery drew curious minds. In 1903, a relief keeper named John Muir reported hearing whispers in the tower at night, like voices carried on the wind. He chalked it up to exhaustion, but it spooked him enough to write it down. In 1910, an inspector found a tattered journal page tucked in the lighthouse, mentioning strange shadows on the cliff, but it wasn't dated or signed. By the 1920s, Lewis fishermen claimed he found a life buoy washed ashore, marked with faded initials that might have been F.I., Flannan Isles, but it was never verified. The mystery bled into popular culture. In 1912, poet Wilfred Wilson Gibson wrote Flannan Isles, spinning a dramatic tale of an overturned chair and untouched meal, though those details were later debunked as poetic flair. By the 1970s, when the lighthouse was automated, keepers shared eerie tales of a presence on Eilean Moor, like the men's spirits never left. Some swore they heard footsteps on the stairs or saw the lamp flicker without cause. In 2018, a movie, The Vanishing, spun a tale of greed and murder, suggesting a washed-up trunk sparked a deadly fight. But it was just fiction. No evidence backs it up. The Flannan Isles case changed lighthouse operations forever. After 1900, the board upped the number of keepers at remote stations from 3 to 4, ensuring 2 always stayed inside. They added stricter rules like daily signal checks with the mainland and better storm monitoring gear. But for the families, Ducat's wife and kids, MacArthur's loved ones, the lack of answers was a wound that never healed. Muirhead himself wrote in a private letter, "I was the last to shake their hands on December 7th, and the memory haunts me." Keeper's disappearance was more than a mystery. It was also a tragedy that left a hole in a small Scottish community. Over 125 years later, no bodies have been found, no wreckage of the missing lifebuoy or boat ever resurfaced. The logbook's final entries, storm ended, sea calm, God is over all, are all we have, and they're more haunting than helpful. Did a freak wave sweep 3 men off a 100-foot cliff? Did isolation drive them to madness, or did something darker, something no report could explain, happen on that lonely rock? The Northern Lighthouse Board called it a tragic accident and sealed the case, but the story remains with a less than satisfactory end. Flannan Isles remain a blank spot on the map, a place where 3 men vanished into the night, leaving their light unlit for the first time. So, what's your take? Was it a wave, a breakdown, or something straight out of a horror story? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's keep this mystery unfolding. For more Unsolved Mysteries, smash the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. We'll see you for the next eerie tale on History Unfolded.